for that introduction, and I hope that you're going away now to work on the paper and get it published. She's done some wonderful work about intervention with kids who are troubled and has presented it but hasn't written enough for publication. And I was explaining to her that I, over the years, have read so many awful scientific studies that were terrifically designed and meant absolutely nothing practically, that it would be very nice to see a good study that has practical outcomes in the literature, so we'll be in touch. We're going to continue on with what we did this morning. I talked to you basically about the importance of relationships and the fact that one of the key components in making relationships work is nonverbal communication. I outlined for you the things that led up to verbal and nonverbal communication being alike and how they're different. And we talked about what I call the dysemic core, those sets of differences that have individuals who have nonverbal processing problems making nonverbal errors that have negative emotional impact, having it continuously and not being aware of the fact that they are the source of the negative responses coming from other people. That's a uniquely terrible spot to be in because you don't know you're making the mistakes. So you keep making them. And the mistakes keep going on and on because it's continuous. What an awful place to be. And the more you're aware of the fact that that could be operating, I think the better off we're going to be to have programs that might, first of all, make others aware that this is an important part of what we talk about when we talk about relating, and that we can do something about it. Certainly, nonverbal communication is not the answer to all of the problems of the world. But if you have individuals who have these problems, it's a place to sort of not take the tent that's flapping all over the place, get a peg and pound it in the ground and get that tent anchored. Because this is something you can do for autism spectrum kids. I have not met a child that would be loosely put in this autism spectrum grouping that could not benefit from nonverbal communication learning. Okay? Not a one. Okay? But we need to talk about the nuts and bolts of it all. What is nonverbal communication? Let's talk about the channels of nonverbal communication. Here's what I sort of want to try to do in the time we have. I want to spend the first third on describing the channels of nonverbal communication so I get you sensitized to what I mean by nonverbal communication and what's going on within each of the channels. Second part, I want to talk a bit about assessment. Third part, I want to talk about intervention and remediation. All right? And unlike this morning, I apologize for going too long, I'm open to questions. I'm open to questions as I go along, so if you have something that comes up, if it's a long question, a clinical question that might be better answered, if we talked afterward, I'll say that. But if it's a question I think that's a good general question for us all, I'll try to answer it here. Okay? So what do you think? When you think of nonverbal communication, what do you think is the earliest nonverbal communication channel? The one that comes into operation first? Eyes. You guys buy this? They buy. They're nodding their heads, saying they're giving me nonverbal stuff. A lot of people over here don't care. This group here seems not to care. But that's okay. That's okay. It's Friday afternoon. I know what we're up against. Eyes, that's the only guess? You think that's the earliest? Touch. We got touch people. We got who? Breathing pattern pulse. Sounds like a rock group. Wait a second. Yes. Smile. Crying. Auditory. You betcha. But actually, yes? Gestures. Good, we got votes for each of the channels. Good, I always like that. Actually, breathing pulse and whatever, the law firm of breathing pulse is probably closest. The most primitive and the earliest channel of nonverbal communication is rhythm. Rhythm. There's a woman by the name of Raff von Engel. The last name is von Engel. She's a developmental kinesiologist at Vanderbilt. And she did a wonderful study to show how important rhythm is. It's a very simple study, an elegant study. She took newborn babies, and when I start describing it, you're going to know the answer. Because good research shouldn't be so complex that people who are professionals wouldn't be able to guess what's important about the study. She set up a metronome next to newborn babies at different rates of speed. The babies fell asleep fastest by 75% to one speed of the metronome. And what was that speed of the metronome? Heartbeat of the mother. Okay? Children are picking up this rhythm. Rhythm is something that underlies all of the channels of nonverbal communication. It's something you're usually not aware of unless you teach at a school like I do in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia is the juxtaposition, especially Emory, between our friends from the South and our friends from the Northeast. Most recently, we've been getting some folks from the West and so on, but mostly it's those two groups. And of course, the people from the South, what do they think about the people from the North? Because rhythm carries personality with it. What do the people from the South think about people from New York and the New England? They don't think they're too fast. They think they're rude. Think about the people from the South. Not just too slow, stupid. I mean, why does bread have to have 3 syllables? Bread. I mean, you're wasting all that time saying bread. You just say bread and get on with it. And these two groups try to interact with each other. My best friend, Marshall Duke, who I've mentioned before, who's done all this research with me, is from New York. Okay? And he has the New York rhythm. For the first 25 years I knew him, I always walked 10 steps behind him because I could never catch up to him. He's always, let's go relax, Steve. Okay. And the rhythm is very important, and it's important because when I go to schools and I do consulting, I ask the schools, I say, first thing I want to do is give me an hour at the school. Let me just walk around. And you'll know what are the places, if you're going to go to a school and you're going to find the kids who are left out, how's the easiest way to see them? What time of the day? T-word, transitions. Any transition, just stand there. And it'll be like somebody came with a magic marker and marked all around the children who don't fit in. They're the ones 3 steps behind. They're the ones looking over here. They're the ones over there. They finished eating their food, in a microsecond while everybody else is they're the kids who don't fit in, and you can see it because they don't fit the rhythm. One of the big problems with children who are adopted, it sounds like a little thing, but it turns out to be a big thing, is that adopted children, more often than not, have a different rhythm than their adoptive parents. And the parents and the kids don't have aren't aware that could be creating difficulties as they try to relate to one another. Okay? I knew that because I have an adopted brother and sister, and Marshall has an adopted son. And those individuals don't fit into the overall biological family rhythm of the biological children and parents. Okay? So little things about rhythm. It's the first sort of thing you want to try to look at, to investigate, to see. Okay? Any questions about rhythm? Babies are very, very responsive to rhythm. Pardon?
Can you fix it? I have an adopted daughter.
You can. Everything we're talking about here can be fixed. Fixed is maybe a bad word. You can make it better, and you can learn. And the first step is to be aware of it, so that you don't get upset with somebody who eats slow or fast, but you understand that's their rhythm. Okay? That sort of thing. I mean, little babies one of the presenters, Emily, I can't think of her last name, Rubin, has the most adorable 10-month-old baby. Just a big old face with a big old grin. And you know, it reminded me of a story of this person that thought that their child was so bright that he could understand language at 12 months of age, a whole bunch of stuff. Because they'd ask him a question, like, how big is baby Fred? And baby Fred would go, okay. And then Marshall started wondering about that, and he went up to baby Fred and he said, pizza pie and vanilla ice cream. That kid went like that. And then he said a couple other things that I won't say, and the kid went like that. But the child is not responding to the words. The child is responding to the rhythm. Those of you who love pets, think your pets understand your words. They hear blah, 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 blah. They hear, the rhythm, let's go for a walk. You could say, let's go get a pork chop, let's put a knife in our face. The dog would still be hopping around. Okay? So keep that in mind. See, okay. So that's rhythm. We'll take these in some order, right? Take the personal space. Personal space is another nonverbal channel. And it's something that we are not aware of until it's violated. Okay? When you got up this morning, what you do is you sit by the side of your bed. One of the reasons it's tough is because you sit by the side of your bed and you pick up, on both sides, your own personal space bubble. It goes out front here, goes to the side, it goes out further in the back. And you take this bubble and you walk all around with it. When you and another person are coming, if you want to see it in operation, you can watch any people. Sometimes I do demonstrations where people walk toward each other. What you'd see is that the people are walking toward each other. They come to about a place, they begin to slow down, and then they'll stop a certain distance away from each other, and they will rock. They'll rock. Why are they rocking? Why are they stopping? Their personal space bubbles have hit. And you are now both bound, and somebody moves forward a step, and the other person moves backward a step. And you can watch a dance. If you watch people interacting or meeting each other, they'll come forward, they'll go back, until they get to the right space bubble. Okay? You don't usually see it. Where's a great place to see the personal space bubble in operation? Elevators. Wonderful place. Wonderful place. Elevators. When you get on an elevator and you're all by yourself, what do? Well, within reason here. What do you? We haven't been together that long. What do you usually do? You go to the corner of the elevator and you slouch a little bit. The door opens, somebody comes in. What do? You come to attention, and then you and the other person get your protractors out, and you divvy up the space. I'm over here, you're over there. Okay? More people come into the elevator. More people. So what's happening? Your personal space bubble is getting pushed in, pressed in. What do? How do you handle this situation? People are inside your personal space bubble. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with it? You ignore it. You look at the numbers. No matter what your IQ is, no matter how smart you are, your mouth goes a little bit slack. And you watch the numbers, and you're saying by that, I'm here all by myself. Nobody's here. And next time you're in an elevator, test this out. Because all you have to do is move your head while you're standing there looking. Move it 5 degrees to the left like this. That person next to you will go, you've just acknowledged they're there. You've had that happen with cars, where you just happen to look over at the other car and the other person looks back at you, because your car then extends your personal space. Okay? And men and women have different. Well, let me first tell you that in our country, in America, by the way, there is American nonverbal language, just like there is Ethiopian nonverbal language and Polish nonverbal language and what have you. And all of you that teach or work in cultural places where there's lots of cultures coming in, lots of ethnic diversity, have to understand that there may be differences in verbal languages, but there for sure will be differences in nonverbal language. Okay? In our country, we have 0 to 18 inches are what we call intimate space. That's the distance that we stand when we're talking about intimate topics. If you're with your wife at a cocktail party and she's over at the other side of the room, and you happen to look over there and there's this guy standing with her and he's within 18 inches talking to her, you start moseying over there. Okay? Not with my wife, you don't. Okay? 18 inches to about 3-4 feet is the conversational distance. That's how far we stand from each other when we're talking and conversing. Okay? 4 feet to 12 feet is sort of social space. It's the sort of thing that you can have people talking to you a bit over that space, but when in that zone, in that 12-foot zone, a lot of other people can overhear you. And then you have from 12 feet to infinity, you have as public space. And that's the distance where we're sort of operating, and it's public things, speeches can take place at that distance too. One of the major violations of nonverbal language is talking about the wrong kind of topic in the wrong kind of space. Especially talking about intimate topics over public space. How's your diarrhea? I mean, you've seen kids do that. I mean, they can be very worrying about how you were sick yesterday and so on. So the minute they see you, out it comes, and what they're doing is making that. Do you know why you get so angry at cell phone users? I mean, because they break the rules of personal space. You're listening into an intimate conversation when you're 12 feet away from them. And that's the reason. Because we have rules that may change with time, because these things are learned within a culture, and culture changes. But right now, cell phone users break these nonverbal rules all the time and get people angry at them. Okay? Let's see, I try to find like little cartoons to sort of show these things. This is a nice one. And this is one that I think relates a lot to especially Asperger kids. And this is from Dilbert, and he's not saying anything about autism spectrum disorders, but you're getting a visit from Hammerhead Bob. I can't tell when I'm boring. I might be boring now. I don't even know it. There's no way to end the conversation. I'm follow you to the bath. You can't escape the relentless conversation. So body language can't stop. So where's your personal space? I mean, it's relentless. You don't pick up the cues that somebody wants you to stay away. Okay. One last one, because there's lots of them for that. Nardo is coming. I'm out of here. Oh, hi, Nardo. In the old country, you did not have to, what we call personal space. Take your hands out of my pockets. Oh, I get it. They're for only your use, right? Personal space is just a very important thing to be aware of and to teach, because breaking rules here is very, very meaningful. and carries a lot of negative consequences with it. And it's one of these interesting things that people generally do not give feedback to people who violate their personal space. They just get out. Okay? That was the example of this morning of the person going to the theater and sitting down next to you when there were more space there. Okay? Any questions about personal? Are you thinking about the kids you deal with and whether they mess up these things, and you're trying to think about beginning a relationship and trying to deepen it and how they might blow it by break some of these rules? I hope so. Any questions about personal space? Yeah?
4 to 12 feet is what kind of space?
Social space, yeah. Men and women are different with the use of personal space. Men take up more space with their body. Their body is their way of taking space. But women do, yes? You're going to disagree with that? But.
Yes, if there's any questions.
Okay. All right, yes, I'm sorry.
My question was, I know this boy with Asperger's syndrome, and his dad's idea of personal space is not exactly what his idea of personal space is, which differs from mine.
Okay.
And his dad wants him to, keep distance away. I don't mind if he wants to get closer or not.
As long as you make it aware.
Right.
And that there is, you can talk, when you're home, you can talk any language you want to somebody, but there's an accepted norm in our country. And you have to be aware of that accepted norm and know that. And then you can say, I know I'm supposed to stand this far away, but I'm going to stand closer to you because I can't understand, I can't hear you, or I've got cotton in my ears. And when you break the rule, if you acknowledge it, then there's not the emotional baggage. Okay? Yeah.
Sometimes we have like energetic perception, and I'm wondering if it fits somewhere between space and rhythm, or does it fit your model?
Probably not. I haven't really done much with that. I haven't much. It has to do with it's energetic.
Energetic perception of energy.
Perception of energy and stuff, and this is like seeing things and so on, and we really haven't done, that hasn't been much a focus of the scientific community yet. Okay? Any questions? Yeah, one more.
Is there a developmental phase? I mean, infants different than children, different than adolescents, different than adults?
Is there a developmental phase with this? All of nonverbal language is developmental. So that what you can get away with as a child is different than what you can get away with as an adult. In this area, 10 years old is what's considered to be adult. We assume 10-year-olds and above are going to operate as adults. Okay? Because as the kids get bigger, a little girl getting on the elevator and staring at you, it's going to be uncomfortable and annoying, but it's not going to scare you. A 13-year-old guy with scruffy beard and 6'1", it's a different thing. So there is a developmental trajectory. And remember what we talked about, that this is learned informally and indirectly. It's very rare that you have parents teaching their kids directly about these things. The kids watch, they pick it up. When they break a rule, maybe mama will hit them across the head, and you have to figure out, what did I do wrong? But they will not give you a tutorial then on personal space. Okay? I'm good at nonverbal language. I'll come right out and say it to you. I'm good at it. And I'm good at it because I had the luxury of having a good set of parents teach me nonverbal communication. My father was born in Poland, a big man, and if he moved 1 millimeter of his eyebrow, it meant he was angry as hell. We'd all look and his eyebrows up, oh my God, throw him the dog and go hide. My mother was born in Sicily. She's 5'2", no matter which way you measured her. She was just like a big pizza pie. And never met an emotion she did not immediately express vehemently. So when you see me walking back and forth here, waving my arms around, I'm mom, except I'm a little taller. Okay? So I had a chance to learn from both aspects of this area. I learned subtlety from my dad. I had to survive. Okay? I learned expressiveness from my mother because if you were close to her, you had to fight yourself with your own arms back. So I had both. But people sometimes ask me, well, how could this lead to kids having trouble fitting in? Let me just give you a brief example from just this idea that it's learned indirectly and informally. Say you had two parents like my mother. It's a little scary for me to think about, but say they were both like my mother. Loud, boisterous, lot of expression, lot of arm waving. Think of that 4-year-old child starting school. And the 4-year-old child comes into the school situation, right? And he's doing something here, and the teacher, preschool teacher, gives children doing this something the look. You know the look. You can't see the look, but this is the look. And all the rest of the kids go, and they put their things away. The kid that has two parents like my mother didn't hear anything. There's nothing being said, And so he keeps doing stuff. And the teacher gives the look even more intently, and the kid still keeps doing stuff. And the teacher gets the idea that maybe this is a stubborn child. Maybe this is a child who's oppositional. And all of a sudden, comes over and maybe, hopefully not, but maybe punishes him. And he doesn't know why. How has this happened? Why am I getting punished for? She never said anything to me that she didn't scream. And I'm used to screaming. People telling me, put that stuff away. And the problem with preschools, even the best of them, is that have you been to preschool? Some of you have preschool kids? Preschool kids, yeah. When you go to a preschool, the preschool teachers are quieter and more relaxed than Mr. Rogers. They make Mr. Rogers look like Mr. Dynamo. And for kids who aren't used to that kind of being able to pick up the subtleties, it's a real tough problem. And I think a lot of kids get their route going to becoming seen as oppositional, uncaring, stubborn, because of just that simple dynamic. Okay? So keep that in mind. Yeah?
I think I heard you said this morning that you have studies that most adults overestimate their nonverbal communication ability. I was hoping you were going to elaborate on that.
I have studies that most adults overestimate their nonverbal processing ability. That's the question. Yeah, and the basic study is simply to ask, how well do you think we give them a test of nonverbal communication? And I will show you those in a little while. And ask them how they think they're doing. How many did you get right out of the 10? And they overestimate by about 2 out of 10. Okay? But now think of that. 2 out of 10 means 20% of the time they're thinking they're getting something right and they're getting something wrong. And if it's continuous, you see you view faces, for instance, 10,000 times a day. That means 2,000 times a day you're in error. It can lead to negative things happening. And these are normally functioning college, as much as normally functioning college students can be seen as normally functioning. Gender differences. Men take up more space. They govern, they take care of and sort of claim their space with their physical body. You just changed. But men their arms will go out, legs will go out. When I see students sitting in class, the guys sit there like this, and if there's chairs where you're sharing, women always have their personal space usually inside the body line. But how do women mark their space then? Purses, umbrellas, objects, all around. Just go to a library and you'll see the guy claiming his space by hanging over 2 chairs, and the women have purses, objects of art, carvings. I don't know what they put down there, but they got them all around themselves. Okay? All right. While we're talking about, the cultural differences, I mentioned that. Any of these topics, by the way, could take an hour to really fully explain, but I want to try to just sensitize you to some of the issues. Touch. Here we've got a real dramatic nonverbal channel. You make touch errors, you are in big trouble. Okay? And you're only allowed to touch on the outside of the body, along the body lines. All right? Never on the inside. We have, with a lot of the work that I do, we had to do a lot of restraining of kids, and we had to learn how to restrain so that it wouldn't set them off. And anytime you go inside the body line, it's considered intimate, inside the body legs, and so on. Okay? Think about how we touch in our society. The United States is the most touch-resistant country in the world. We do not touch. There's one country that touches less than we do. England. Bless the English, because they're worse than we are. But we got all this space, but they don't have all this space, but they still don't touch as much as we do. So when we touch, from the time, really, kids are not supposed to touch each other from the age of 6 on. You know stories of little boys and little girls were caught hugging and thrown out of school. They could beat the hell out of each other. They could maybe get an hour off, but you hug. Uh-oh. Touching that way, intimate touching. So that somehow then through that process, when you get to be adults and you start finding that personal other that you want to be with, you got to go back to touching again. And you don't have a clue. You don't know how to do that. And so watching sometimes the kinds of touching behavior that goes on as people try to reclaim that, or when you touch somebody, you better do it the right way or else you're going to be in trouble. With men, what's the only way you can touch? Handshake. Okay? You can hug if you're men, but you have to do it in a very special way. You go up to somebody, you don't touch this part, you go and you touch and you go 1, 2, 3, break. Guys, right? I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, break. 1, 2, 3, 4, uh-oh. Okay? It's always fun to see. When I do this class with the second semester seniors, I have the guys practice hugging and how to do that and so on. And it's a slice because they all do the 1, 2, 3 hug. So the rules for touch, it's a very fragile kind of channel. But yet you're supposed to learn very specific, unique things. For instance, when you approach somebody from behind, there's only one way you can approach them from behind. What do you have to do? There is a 1 square inch place here. And you go and you take this finger and you go, excuse me? Right? Wouldn't you say excuse me when you do that? Why? What are you excusing yourself for? Well, then you ought to say the whole thing. Excuse me, I violated your personal space bubble back here, but I just want to, and then you want to say whatever you're going to say. But that's why it's that way. Okay? How do you learn that? Who taught you to do that? You picked it up. But now, could you possibly think that there might be some children who might not be able to pick that up? And therefore, when they go to get somebody's attention, they put their hand on their back. You can't touch here. You can't touch here or here. It's got to be here. Why not teach that directly? How many of your kids that don't fit in have been taught that directly, how to approach somebody from behind? Simple thing. But boy, you approach somebody wrong from behind and you grab them on the shoulder and you can be stigmatized for the rest of the time you're there. Okay? Also, if you want to get into a fight with somebody, Quickest way to do that, take this finger again. This finger there, and where do you put it? Right here. Why? Why? Why is that wrong? Yeah.
Major alerting point.
It's a who?
A major alerting point. When somebody's badly head injured, you can wake them up. Hitting him right.
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, but that may be a but that's not the reason I would do it. I would get upset. Why? Would you think about it? How about if they went like, why there? Why right this middle part? Where are you? When you say me, where do you go? You go here. This is you. I'm here. In China, you're here. You don't poke somebody in China on the head. Okay? Or we saw the picture when the first keynote speaker was giving her lecture, the little boy went and pounded the person on the nose. And there were lots of things that she drew from that, the speaker. I'm saying you don't hit somebody on the nose. You violated their personal space. This kid doesn't know personal space rules. I would try to teach that child, if he's going to touch somebody, how to do it. Okay? So the learning instances are always there. Any questions about touch? I need to go a little faster, I guess. Okay? All right, touch. Facial expressions. This is the one that everybody thinks the most of when they think of nonverbal communication. It's the one that has the most research done on it. In fact, it's overdone. The literature is 95% in nonverbal communication about faces, which is neither good or bad, except it's good for faces, but there are all these other channels that we know nothing about. And we also know that the face is the easiest of all the nonverbal channels to fake. In fact, we learn very early on how to dissimulate. When Aunt Molly gives you the pair of socks instead of the doll that you wanted, you're not supposed to go, "What the?" You go, "Thank you very much, Aunt Molly." And kids can do that, especially little girls, ahead of little boys, by 3 and 4 years of age. So you're taught to do that. Yet we rely on the face so much. That's why psychopaths are so good, because they know how to do their face to get you to think they're feeling one way when they're actually feeling another. So keep that in mind, that the face is the easiest nonverbal channel to fake. Okay? But it does hang right out there. It has all kinds of emotions that it can show. Paul Ekman has made a career out of studying the face and the smiles and all those things. One of the single best predictors, one of the single best predictors of whether or not somebody is going to be popular is how much they smile. This says, every night the other dwarfs never understood why they were always thrown out and he was allowed to stay. And the dwarf has this nice smile. It's Smiley from the 7 Dwarfs. So, you can use that. There is the concept of the resting face. You need to be aware of that. The resting face is the face that you have on and what it communicates when you are at rest, not thinking about anything. You're not communicating any emotion. Okay? 3 out of 4 people have either a neutral or a positive resting face. 1 out of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. 1 out of every 4 has a negative resting face. Means your face is communicating something negative even though you're not feeling negative. I don't know if you know if you're one of these people, but it has tremendous impact for the beginning choice of a relationship, because if you're going to walk up to somebody and start a conversation, you're going to look for somebody that's going to be communicating something positive, right? So, one of the things to keep in mind as we think about the resting face and what it can do to interpersonal interactions is to realize that as we get older, I'm sad to say, our faces begin to fall down. They begin to change. Gravity pulls it down. So that when we're talking about people 50 years of age and over, more than half of people 50 years of age or over have a negative resting face and don't realize that their face has changed from this positive face that they used to have to this negative resting face, which is one reason why little children are sometimes very terrified of old people coming up and saying hi, because they don't look very friendly to them, okay? So keep that in mind, the resting face. There's been a great deal of work in the area of severe mental disturbance and autistic children on where they look in the face. And information is that they look at the wrong part of the face. They look at the mouth rather than at the eyes. And that research has been very helpful because now we can train kids to look at the eyes of individuals and thereby improve their nonverbal communication. The 2 or 3 studies that I've done in this regard, in essence, show, for instance, do you think autistic kids express emotion more, the same, or less than typical kids through their faces? Less. Okay. The truth is they show the same amount. They show the same amount of happy, sad, fearful. And anger. Yeah. Happy, sad, fearful, and anger. The kicker is, though, and here's the kicker, they show the same emotion for the same amount of time, but they're not contingent. In other words, they smile when they should be frowning. They're frowning when they should be smiling. So they're showing the emotions, they're appearing, but they're not appearing contingent, which means if you have that information, then the job is to teach the child they have the ability to express these emotions. They need to express them contingently. And that's where the intervention then needs to go. That's where I like the idea of strengths and weaknesses and what they can do and what they can't do. And I don't care if the kid's autistic or obsessive compulsive or anxiety ridden. If they have this difficulty, I would approach it the same way. They got to be able to learn this stuff. Yeah.
I was just wondering if anybody had done any type of research or if you knew of any about autistic children or children in the autism spectrum and the resting face.
The resting faces are much more negative. Yeah. The resting faces are more negative. Generally looking, and what they say is their faces are neutral. But there is no such thing as a neutral face. A neutral face is negative. If you're at a cocktail party and you're standing trying to talk to somebody that has a neutral face, it's negative. It's just negative. Okay? I've had arguments with other researchers about that where they say, well, the facial expression is neutral. I said, well, you want to spend time with anybody that has a neutral facial expression? I mean, what are they thinking? What's going on? Okay. All right. Yes, the question. Has there been... Yes, absolutely. The question is, can you train smiling? And the answer is yes, you can. What they do, you know who's way ahead of you all in this? Is the people in sales. Business world knows that if you smile more, you'll get a better start. So they train their people to smile. They do it in a variety of ways, and I don't have my access to all of those. Yeah.
And the second part is, I know, I think it was last year, the lady that did the prompt thing talked about training muscles.
Right.
So if an autistic person has trouble coordinating their muscles, I mean, how much of that is sensory integration and speech and
Absolutely. How much of that, in other words, how much of what is really contributing to the inability to smile, how much is sensory integration, I don't know. I don't know. And each kid will be different Because I can tell you that I could take two autistic children, one would have sensory integration stuff and the other one wouldn't. So this idea that there's this homogeneous group of people waiting for us to find the one thing that will work with this one kid or this one type I don't think we're going to do that. I think we tell what the problem is. This kid needs to smile, and then we work on finding all the ways that we know about how to teach smiling and see which one works with this kid. It may work with the next kid, it may not, because they may have other causes. But the problem is there. It's like I was explaining to someone, if the problem of the child was that they walked into walls, that was their problem. They walked into walls. Would you just then say, well, that's the way they are. They walk into walls. Ba-whoomp, ba-whoomp, and they keep walking into walls. You'd say we got to do something to stop that. And I don't know why he's walking into walls, but I'll find out what stops him from walking into walls. When we're dealing with autism spectrum kids and a lot of other kinds of kids, relating is like walking into a wall. Whoomp, whoomp, and it's hard for them. It's part of what they do. But I'm incapable of saying, well, that's the way they are. I want to find all those ways to stop that kid from walking into walls. How can I help him relate better? And it may be a whole number of things. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? That's the way to start. Then you do things, okay? Because there are ways, even having autistic kids hold a pencil in their mouth forces their muscles into a smiling mode. Okay? They don't have to work at it. It does it for them. Okay? Simple stuff like that. One more question, I'll go on. Yeah.
I do a lot of photography, and I've noticed that autistic kids will smile for a camera.
Autistic kids will smile for a camera. So there you got two things. There's two things to teach smiles. You got the pencil, you got to make believe you're taking photographs of them all the time. There it comes. And it's contingent. And you reward that. And you sit down and you say that was great. And you make something of it, and you're proud of it, and they're proud of it. Okay? All right. Let's see. Gestures and postures, we can go through that pretty fast. There is a resting posture. You can tell a lot about how people are with their resting posture. I don't want to talk too much about that because I want to get to the... just postures and gestures are important, and to control those and so on. And one great sex difference here that I want you to be aware of, it's called the noddies. The noddies. What are noddies? The women are all going, yeah, I know what the noddies are. And the guys are all going. Women nod, even when they don't agree. I've given talks like this, and the woman is going that, and I figure she likes this talk. She comes up to me and she says, I didn't buy a thing you said. And this guy is looking at me like X-rays are going to burn through my head. I'm saying, I'm not going to make it out of the room alive. This man's going to beat me within an inch of my life because I said something to offend him. And he comes up, that was great. And I want to say, well, why didn't you nod your head just once to say you really were buying that? Okay? Women and men interacting and so on. But the gestures and postures are something that it's hard to make general sweeping things, but I know that there are a lot of postures and gestural stuff going on in autism spectrum disordered kids that communicate things, and that you need to understand what they're communicating, and it also takes the same amount of work, but I want to make sure I get to the assessment and remediation. Okay? So if there's questions about it, we can maybe talk about it later. I want to say one more thing. I want to talk about paralanguage. And paralanguage is everything that goes into the words, because autistic kids spectrum kids have a lot of trouble with this. It's everything that goes along with the auditory communication of words except the the words themselves. So it's everything, the tone of voice, the speed, the rhythm, those things that fill in. You know, the people that hum between words when they're talking. And the Saturday Night Live has done a wonderful set of comedy sketches on various families built on nonverbal rule breakage. So has Seinfeld. They do a lot of these things. But the Loud family, I don't know if you remember the Loud family shouting at each other all the time. The Whiners, Ben and Wendy Weiner. Coming from. So it's all those things about words, except for the words themselves. What do I want to say about this quickly so we can move on? We talk slower than we listen. We listen at a rate 3 times faster than most people talk, so that there's a lot of time to miss. Well, somebody, if you meet what we call a slow talker, you've met slow talkers. There's a wonderful, I have a whole collection of tapes and stuff. I have Bob and Ray, an old radio comedy team who does this, a wonderful thing with the guy is coming for the Slow Talkers of America meeting, and Ray is trying to interrupt, trying to get him to go along and so on. So again, if your child talks too slowly and so on, people will fill in words. Plus, if you talk slow, usually you're thought of not being as bright as people who talk faster. So that's another thing to think about. One thing I want to leave you with in this area of paralanguage is how we don't pay attention to things we can change. How many of you have heard your voice on a tape recorder? How many of you liked your voice immensely on the tape recorder? Oh, there's always one. Come on. There's one. Okay, there's one over there. Okay, there's usually 1 or 2. Well, anytime. So what have you done to change your voice? You know what it's equivalent of? It's the equivalent of going to the mirror before you go out. You look in the mirror and there's a piece of celery hanging from your teeth. And you go, oh, there it is. Why wouldn't you change it? You don't like it. But you just say, oh, okay, I sound terrible. You can learn to talk faster. You can learn to talk slower. You can go to a diction coach. You could learn to get, if you whined, you could get the whine out of your voice. If you had too much of a southern accent, you could get that changed. You could do whatever you wanted to do, but you don't. That's the power of nonverbal communication and the fact that it is out of our awareness. And the thought that we can't do anything about it. We just accept it. It's the way we are, but it's not. It's the way we've learned to be. And if you learn to be that way, you can change it and learn to be another way. Okay? Any questions about nonverbal channels? Objectics has to do with, objectics has to do with what you put on yourself to communicate. It has to do with the clothes that you wear. You know, we're gonna form a group called the Beige Tones and sing. You know, we could do that. Or the way you cut your hair, the things you put on, the earrings. Some women have nice long earrings. Some are not wearing any earrings. Some have curly hair. Some have sunglasses on their head. These are all objectics. And the point is that you want to dress the child to be not like everybody else, but so that they are knowing what they're communicating by what they're dressing, okay? What they're like. Perfumes fit here. All tremendous impact on nonverbal communication and relationship formation. Okay. Yeah.
Ethnic minorities and immigrants are far more sensitive to changing their language to accommodate the pragmatics, the accents, and so forth, than most of us, white middle class.
Other people from other cultures are more interested. Well, more interested in changing their more aware of their need to change to fit the majority. But that's why when we look at nonverbal communication with whites and blacks, for instance, in this country, whites can read other whites' facial expressions better than they can read African Americans. African Americans can read whites and blacks the same. Because the blacks are the minority, they have to know how to read the majority. So there is more push for minorities to pick up what's going on with the majority, if they're aware of it. If they're aware of it. And again, this is known. This is one that I just thought maybe some of the younger parents would the kid's playing at home, he's saying bye-bye, he's talking loud, comes in, and then he sits at the person at the office and screams at the person at the office because that's the way he talked at home with his little children. Okay? So no other questions about that? Then I'd like to, one more. That in the studies that we did, that 20% of the people thought they did 20% better than they actually did.
That was worse than the rest, or was it certain ones that were commonly mistaken, or?
You mean the kinds of emotions that were missed?
Yeah, I didn't know if it was just facial expression.
It's both facial expressions and tones of voice. Those are the two tests we had. Okay? And it usually was, what they missed most is anger, which is interesting. They thought they were communicating it when they weren't, and they weren't communicating it when they thought they were. Yeah?
About smiles, it sure looks like smiles are one of the few human gestures that are really universal, and it looks like they're universal across time. I always wonder if anybody's ever done anything about this. Could it be that was one of the few things that's hardwired for us?
Yeah, the question is, does smiles, in essence, are smiles hardwired? And I'd say yeah. I'd say yes. It's hard to come up with any other positive emotion other than happy. I mean, it's just, there's more separate non-negative emotions than there's this one big one. So that when we end up with individuals missing, not being able to read happy, we're dealing with a very special individual. Okay. Now, what I want to just, because we've got what I want to try to talk to you about next is assessment. And what I want to talk to you about is the fact that the books that I've written were written so that they could be used by everyday parents, teachers, and non-professionals in order to help them do what might be needed to be done to help their children learn nonverbal communication. It was not written for professionals to use. Okay? But professionals can use them, and they have used them. And so I'm a big believer in informal assessment. That you can do a lot of assessing on your own about the ability of your kids or yourself to read nonverbal cues. Observations. Bring the child along, have them look at a mall, have them look at what's going on in the mall, have them tell you about what they think is happening with interactions, having them read faces, and so on. You can learn a lot. One of the best ways to learn about how somebody can read faces is to turn the TV on. And what shows are great at this? Soap operas. Perfect. Because they show close-ups of faces and they emphasize negative emotions. Okay? When somebody's happy on the soap opera, you know he's going to die the next week. You just know it. And it fits him right. Suits him right. So that what you do is you turn the sound down. And you have the child, and if you have the capacity, tape a program. So you can stop it and say, what are the people feeling? Tell me what they're feeling. What does this facial expression mean? What does that mean? Okay? You can do that and get a general idea of how well your kids are doing. Soap operas are great because they zoom in on faces. And why do they zoom in on faces? Because the lines, you have to learn lines so fast in a soap opera that in actuality, while they're zooming in on Zoe's face, Ben is looking over Zoe's face to read his lines for the next thing, and then it switches around and zooms in on Ben's face, And Zoe's looking over to see her next line. See? So they go back and forth and they can get that done. But it makes a very nice assessment tool. But you might have to do formal assessment. And there are a number of ways to do formal assessment, one of which is a test that I've developed, which is called the DANVA, the Diagnostic Analysis of Nonverbal Accuracy, DANVA. And it's made up of faces. There's a happy face. Sad face. Okay. And we have happy, sad, angry, and fearful faces. And we have a test for postures. And we have happy, sad, angry, and fearful postures. And each of the, there's equal, so there are 24 of these. There are 6 examples of happy, 6 of sad, 6 of angry, and 6 of fearful, 3 of them high intensity, and 3 of them at low intensity. Then there is a paralanguage test, which in essence has the child, or there's both a child version and a adult version of somebody saying the sentence, "I'm going out of the room now, but I'll be back later." And there are 6 of them that are happy, 6 sad, 6 angry, 6 fearful, 3 I'm really angry, really intense, and 3 low intensity. And so we can, this is of course, as you can tell, the receptive side. So we're trying to get at how people can read these cues or not. That's called the Diagnostic Analysis of Nonverbal Accuracy Postures Test. The who?
What do you call it for short?
For DANVA.
Oh, that last one was also down.
Also part of the DANVA. Also part of the DANVA. By the way, if you want any information, I have manuals for this. Email me. I will send you a manual. What we do is we make the tests available for cost. I think it's break-even points around $75 for a test. We have CD-ROM versions available. We have traditional photographs and audio tapes, so that if you need that or school needs that, and if you can't afford the $75, I send it to you, you use it, and then you send it back to me. Okay?
How young can you use that?
We use this as young as 3.5. I will give you, the email is snowwick, S-N-O-W-I-C-K, S-N-O-W-I-C-K, no I, at Emory, E-M-O-R-Y, .edu. And I want to show you briefly how I use this, how I use the test. I don't know if you all can read that. Let's see. Okay. What I do, there's both these. What I get is for each test, I get an error profile form. This is going to be a little tedious, but I think it's good for you to see how I would approach this. This is a youngster, for instance, who took the child faces test. There are 24 items. They missed 13. Errors by judgment. So we don't need to have many degrees to know that this is a child who doesn't read faces well. There are norms available for children all the way from 4, and we go all the way through adulthood up to 90s. We have a group of folks that were in their early 90s that took the test. So we know what the average score is at each age level. So this child missed 13 of them. And then what the profile sheet breaks it down to is it says the errors were none for happy, 3 for sad, 4 for angry, and 6 for fearful. Okay, so they missed all the fearful ones. Then I look and see what are the number of errors. The same 13 errors, I break it down to see whether there are errors by high intensity or low intensity. Here they've missed 6 high, 7 low. Okay? Then this table puts both of those together so that I can see that the 13 errors are distributed in this way. Those are the 3 sad errors, the 4 angry errors, and the 6 fearful errors. Okay? Then this last table is interesting and important because this last table tells me what they said when they missed the item. So if they missed the sad item, what did they say instead of sad? Misattribution. Okay? This, by the way, I'm going to show you another. This, by the way, is a report of an ADHD child. They sort of make errors all over the place. It doesn't fit into one place. But let me show you this. Now here's a 11-year-old child who's missed 7 of the 24. Okay? Which isn't so bad. You get down here, and we look at where the errors occurred. None to happy, none to sad, 6 to angry, 1 to fearful. This is a child who does not see anger. Okay? Intensity, equally distributed. Put the two tables together. We see where that's happening. Now, let's look at the important stuff here and see what they said instead of the right answer. Here's a child who missed all the angry, and what did they say instead of angry? Sad. Okay? Can you pick up the scenario of what problems this youngster would have? It's a good kid. Let's assume it's a good child. So what's going to happen? What would happen? Yeah, go. He would try to help someone who he thought was sad because he's a good kid, but the kid is not sad, the kid is angry. So as he approaches to help out, he gets verbally abused, punched or whatever, and he backs off. He tries to help, and he's getting yelled at. And he tries to make sense out of this and figure out if this happens how many times before the child decides, I'm not going to try anymore. Or the child decides, other people are just angry. I can't do anything with them. I don't know why why are they treating me this way? And that gets repeated, remember, because this is continuous. The child is picking up faces all day long and making this error.
I wonder
Yeah.
about something. I wonder about the social learning aspect, because if there's a parent, if the child has a single parent maybe who says, whenever the parent is angry, they say, I'm disappointed in you, I'm sad about your behavior, but they're really angry and don't know it. It seems that could that be a taught behavior?
I think it is a taught behavior. It's a dynamic that I don't know why the child's this way. First of all, I would start and say the child is this way, so I got to change it. Then I might, a lot of our research is trying to figure out what are the antecedents to children developing these kinds of dysemias, because they're very specific. This is an encapsulated dysemia. Those errors aren't much different than what you'd find for other kids his age. But they're encapsulated. It's in a particular area that creates great interpersonal problems for this youngster. Okay? How he got there, that's as good a guess social learning as any. Maybe the parents have this difficulty too. I don't know. But I do know if he has this, he's going to have trouble. Okay? So that's how I use the DANVA. There's other ways. We look for the fact of whether there are children that miss happy. And if children miss happy, it's almost always indicative of something pretty severe going on. We find that with autistic kids, Asperger children, and they mix up somehow happy and anger, which is a very flammable kind of mix to miss. We find right now we're working on research. We have literally hundreds of kids who are diagnosed with particular diagnoses, and we're looking at the pattern of nonverbal errors that are part of that diagnosis, so that we can say these are the kinds of nonverbal errors associated. Maybe they cause it, maybe they're the result of it, but they're there, and we need to be able to take care of them if we're going to help these children get better. Okay? Any questions about the DANVA? If you want, like I say, information about it, I'll be glad to send that to you. There's another instrument you might be interested in. It's called the Emory Dysemia Index. This is an observational rating form that we developed at Emory that has to do with for teachers and other observers to observe and rate the nonverbal behavior of the children. And we focus in on gaze and eye contact, space and touch, paralanguage. The scores along the side are the sort of cutoff scores that say that is somebody who, above that score, means that there's probably a problem operating. Okay? And if you want copies of that, they were supposed to be in your handouts. Are they there? Okay, good. Good. Pardon? 15, 12, 13. 15, 12, 13 on that. And it's 11, 13, 7, and 7. 11, 13, 7, and 7. Yeah, they're above that score. But I mean, it's one of those things that the higher the score, the more problems the kids are going to be having, and that's what the key is. Any questions about that stuff? Pardon? First page, sure. And I'll hang around afterward, and if people. Okay, now hang in there. We got, 10 minutes? We can do it, right? Come on, y'all. You may be tired, but I've got to take Amtrak tomorrow, so come on. All right, let me say a few words about remediation. And it breaks down into this simple idea. There are two general emphases to remediation of nonverbal processing difficulties. One, you can teach to a basic skill level. I have been evangelizing schools to preschools and kindergartens to test the children coming in as to their ability to read nonverbal cues, and that they should provide curricula to teach and bring all children up to an acceptable minimal level of nonverbal communication accuracy. Because so many kids come into preschool programs with varying skills because they've learned they've learned their nonverbal ability through their families. Think of your families as being the best possible way to learn about all the emotions in the world. I don't think so. And a lot of kids pick it up when they're in school. A lot of kids pick this stuff up, but the truth is a lot of kids don't, because of the problem I mentioned about the kids not picking up the cues and being seen as being a particular way when they're really not. So that one is to teach to a basic skill level. Get everybody above average if we can. Teach to a specific defect. It's a little bit heretical, but after 30 years in this area, I've come to the conclusion that diagnoses don't help me. I've seen people argue for 3 or 4 weeks about whether a child was A or B, and then somebody asked the question, what difference does it make for what I'm going to do with this child? And there was none. Perhaps there will be someday, but there's not now. And so what I would urge, what I suggest, is to teach to specific deficits and to use the strengths to teach the deficits. Okay? Having nonverbal processing problems in this regard. I've thought about it I'm colorblind. I know it's hard to tell from my outfit, but my wife put this all together for me. And when she's not there, I look like Bonzo the Clown opening up a filling station. I can't see red. I can't see it. It's not there. I see blue and yellow occasionally. But I drive a car. Okay? I've got to figure out, I'll never see red. And some of the kids that you deal with will never be able to see the things that other kids see, but they can compensate for it. They can learn other ways of getting that information. I'll never see red, but I know that the red light is at the top, except in certain southern towns, which you don't know, it's at the middle. But that's another story. And that's another ticket that I had to, because they didn't buy my story that I was colorblind. But you learn other ways of getting the needed information. I'm not as imbibed in this. I'm much broader than a lot of folks are in this area. But it's just something that seems to me that you've got to be able to find a deficit and then take care of it. And it's not enough to say, well, they've got this physical thing wrong with them, or their brain doesn't do this thing, so therefore we can't do anything. You can. I can never see red, but I can figure out how to get the information I need that red would usually give me. Okay? And that's what teaching to the specific deficit is. Like the youngster that had the errors in anger and sadness, I don't have to spend 3 sessions teaching him happy and fearful. That's not where the problem is. The problem is on anger and sadness, and just in faces. That child could hear voices perfectly. One way I could deal with that is to say to the child, listen to what people say, don't read their faces. ADHD kids, for instance, are better auditorially than they are visually. When you ask them what they depend on, they say they watch faces. They're using the wrong modality, the one that they're weaker in, and they don't even know it. Okay? So all this information can help you, I think, make kinds of specific progress. There are 2 different strategies. Teach to make a weakness into a strength. This is the Charles Atlas. Turn a 60-pound weakling into me. Or you can teach to compensate for the weakness, and that's what I was just talking about. But those are 2 decent approaches. Use direct learning. These are children who do not see what we see and do not hear what we hear. Okay, and you have to keep that in mind. Did the RDANVA come to you? Did you get an RDANVA remediation program? No. If you would send it to me, if they didn't send it to you, I would be glad to send it to you free of charge. What I do in the RDANVA is an outline, basic outline you could use. You could do this at home in your kitchen. All the stuff I develop has low technology to it. And what I try to do is I try to teach directly what the kids have not learned indirectly. I teach them to discriminate nonverbal cues. That means I try to get them to tell the difference between are those 2 faces alike or are they different? And you can develop your own faces. You can go through, are they alike, are they different? You're not saying anything about the emotion being shown. The second phase of the process is to create the understanding of the meaning of nonverbal cues. Tell me what this face is. They have to say it's a happy face, or you say, find me the happy face. That's looking at that face and say, check the happy face. Check what you think that person is, happy, sad, angry, fearful. So now you're getting at the emotion. Third phase is meaningful expression of specific motor or nonverbal emotional expression. In here, you want to get at the expression of the person, so you give them these kinds of cues. You've forgotten your homework assignment. How do you look? You videotape that. You give feedback. You have people do it to mirrors. You tell them what they did right and what they did wrong, so they now know, they learn how to respond accordingly, the expression part. And then finally, you get to applying nonverbal emotional cues to understanding social situations. This is where we first intersect with social skills programs. Social skills programs sometimes have problems because what they do is that they assume the child knows the nonverbal language. They say, here's what you do when you see in an angry situation. Here's what you, but they assume the kid can learn that stuff. I'm saying that they need to learn these other things first if the social skills are truly going to work. And this is where you get at, you ask who, what, where, why questions about this picture. Okay? And the RDANVA is a way it sets it up for you. And we've done studies where we have taken kids. This one here. This one here. Again, I'll be hanging around here.
Dr. Nowicki, is it R-DANVA?
Yes, R-DANVA. Okay. Here's a study we did that's published this last year where we intervened with kids who couldn't read faces. We have a RDANVA program we did for 45 minutes a week for 6 weeks. This was the scores. The kids were identifying 12 faces on average out of 24. At the end of it, they were averaging 19.67. They were a little better than average. So it can be taught. These were typical kids. Atypical kids would take a little bit longer, take a little more trouble. You've all been wonderful. You've all hung in there. I promised you this morning I was going to tell you, remember this one? Superior rewritten, set in accordance with an elaborate code, sacred code written over, known by none and understood by all. Here's my sentence that I'm going to be known for the rest of eternity. Nonverbal information is sent and received largely out of awareness and continuously according to rules that are learned indirectly and informally but are known to most individuals and culture. And though thought to be understood by all, nonverbal information in reality is not understood by a significant number of people who may not even be aware of their deficit or of its potential negative impact on your lives. Thank you.
The UC Davis Mind Institute began in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, learning disabilities, and other brain disorders is helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please call or visit our website to find out more about current studies, our research team, and upcoming events.